Prince Stash De Rola often gets mentioned in various Rolling Stones biographies as a mysterious young aristocrat who got busted with Brian Jones. Apart from the fact that he and Brian were close friends, little is known about him. A fascinating figure in the 1960s as an actor both in Europe and Hollywood, musician, fashion trendsetter, lover of some of the most beautiful women of the time, and friends with a veritable who's who of pop icons. To this day, he remains a man of wealth and taste.
The tragedy of Brian was that he came when I was at Paul McCartney's, and he was in a shocking state, and he said, "Stash, they're too strong for us." I, on the other hand, was pumped up by Paul McCartney, who kept saying, "It's bullshit, and you gotta fight those people, and even if you were caught with, well, you'd have to say, well, see what you caught me doing." You know, he was very sanguine on the whole thing. You gotta fight these people, nonsense, etc. And Keith felt that it was very possible that he would go down for years. And what was he charged with? For allowing his premises to be used for drugs. That's what he was charged with, because there was no evidence in Redlands either. There were a few pills that Mick had that were prescription pills. The only person who had real drugs was Robert Fraser. And Robert Fraser was a junkie by then, had been very, very cool. You know, he had this very upper class sort of way. And he told the police, "Listen here, I'm a diabetic. Return this stuff to me." And they returned everything to him to begin with, but then they said, "We need one at least for analysis." So Robert said, "Well, fuck it, you know. The main thing a junkie's concerned with is, not to run out of stuff. You know, That was the main thing."
But didn't you have a court date looming?
We did, but that was a bit later.
What year did you guys appear, or was it?
Yeah, we did. We Keith and Mick, but the wind had changed. There was this famous editorial, "Breaking a Butterfly on the Wheel" in the Times, and suddenly they were fined and released, and not, they didn't do any time at all. And, Mick and Keith got off, and then it came to Brian and my turn, and I was in Italy almost till the day, a couple of days before, a day or two before I had to appear. And I returned to England, and I had been in conference with my attorneys, and I was determined to fight it all the way to, whatever, and it was, and Paul had been really, "This is a scandal, and they've got nothing against you." And they realized that they didn't have a case against me, so they announced when we walked in that they were dropping all charges. And Brian told me he was pleading guilty. He'd been told to plead guilty. I begged him, I said, "Your attorneys are complete idiots. You should do what everybody says we ought to do, is fight it to the bitter end. And ask for, appeal and the whole deal." Ryan said, no, they told me to plead guilty, and then he did plead guilty, which badly weakened my own compensation case. And although they acquitted me and gave me money, little bit of money, I mean, it was a trifle, Brian was sent to jail, and briefly, and then released and so on. But it was totally his undoing. Brian was never ever the same.